Romper Room, where we ball a break. Big wins, big losses, all at stake. Party vibe, poker life, always crunk. Feel rich, feel broke, that's just the funk, yeah. Seen boys rise, seen boys fall. Bluffing stacks, risking it all. Got the queens, thought I locked the pot. Straight flush flip, now I'm feeling shot. It's the hustle, it's the grind, no time to assume. All in a full life in the Romper Room. Romper Room.
All right, so Gustavo wanted the lowdown on final table strategy.
Yeah.
And trust me, this shit's way more complex than just memorizing some pre-flop charts.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking a whole different mindset here.
For sure.
Where folding like a little bitch can actually be the most baller move you make.
Seriously, when you hit that final table, the game changes.
Yeah.
It's not just about stacking chips anymore. It's about understanding what those chips are really worth in terms of cash money.
Right, like suddenly those plastic discs are transforming into dollar bills right before your eyes.
Exactly. And because of the way payouts work, a 100,000 chip difference between first and second place can be worth way more than the same difference between sixth and seventh.
Damn, that's wild.
Right.
So how do we even wrap our heads around this whole chip value thing?
That's where the independent chip model, or ICM, comes in.
Okay.
It's basically a mathematical model that calculates the real monetary value of your chips at a final table.
Okay, so instead of just counting chips like a goddamn kindergartner, we need to understand the actual cash value behind them.
You got it.
Gotcha.
And this is where things get interesting.
Okay.
Because of ICM, sometimes the chip leader doesn't actually have the most money in their pocket.
Really?
Especially if the payout structure is top-heavy.
Wait, so even if you're crushing it with a massive sack,
Yeah.
you might not be the one sitting prettiest.
Exactly. Let's say the first place prize is a cool $1 million.
Okay.
But second place gets half that.
Right.
That means every chip you win battling for the top spot is worth double what it would be if you were just fighting for a min cash.
So basically, every decision at the final table carries way more weight than in a regular tournament.
You're damn right. And this leads us to another crucial concept, risk premium.
All right, what the hell is risk premium? Lay it on me.
Think of it like this. It's the extra edge you need in a hand to justify risking your entire tournament life.
Okay.
Because those payout jumps are so significant.
Right.
Even if you're normally a loose-aggressive player, you have to tighten up at a final table and be way more selective with your hands.
So even if you're usually a maniac at the final table, you got to play like a goddamn saint.
Pretty much the risk of busting and missing out on a huge pay jump is just too damn high.
Yeah.
Some sources even say those risk premiums can be over 20%.
What?
Which means you need to be winning a hand over 70% of the time to justify going all in.
Holy shit, 20%.
Yeah.
So basically, even with pocket aces, there are spots where folding is the right move.
Yeah.
That just feels wrong somehow.
I know, but it makes sense when you consider those payout jumps.
Okay.
Folding might feel like you're being a pussy, but if it means securing a higher payout position, it can actually be the most profitable play.
All right, I'm starting to see the light here.
Good.
So we got to be tighter than a drum. We got to understand the true value of our chips, and we got to factor in this risk premium bullshit.
Yeah.
What else should we keep in mind?
Well, your stack size plays a massive role in how you approach the final table.
Okay, so how does stack size affect our strategy?
Think of it like a three-way street fight. You got your big stacks, your medium stacks, and your short stacks.
Yeah.
Each one has to fight differently to survive.
Okay, break it down for me.
Big stacks can be more aggressive because they have more chips to play with.
Right.
They can bully the table, push people around, and really dictate the flow of the game.
So it's like they're holding a goddamn bazooka
Yes.
while everyone else is playing with water pistols.
Exactly. Then you got your medium stacks.
Okay.
They need to be a bit more cautious.
Right.
They can't go all in willy-nilly, but they can't just sit back and wait for the blinds to eat them alive either.
So they're like the strategic players picking their spots carefully.
Exactly. They got to pick their battles, look for opportunities to chip up without putting their entire stack at risk.
Gotcha. And what about those short stacks? Are they just screwed?
Not necessarily they're the underdogs, but they can be dangerous.
Yeah.
They have nothing to lose and are more likely to gamble, which can make them unpredictable and difficult to play against.
So they're basically like those little chihuahuas that yap and snap at your ankles.
Yeah, kinda. They might not be the biggest dog in the fight, but they can still bite.
So we got to be aware of our stack size and adjust our strategy accordingly.
For sure.
Big stacks, bully medium stacks strategize, and short stacks gamble.
Yeah.
Got it. What else?
Payout structures are huge.
Okay.
You got to understand whether the tournament, has a top-heavy payout where the winner takes home the lion's share, or a flatter structure where the prizes are more evenly distributed.
So how does the payout structure affect our game plan?
Well, in a top-heavy structure, aggression is key.
Okay.
You want to accumulate chips and go for the win, even if it means taking more risks.
Makes sense. More risk, more reward, right?
But in a flatter structure, survival becomes more important.
Okay.
You want to play tighter, avoid unnecessary risks, and let those other idiots knock each other out.
So it's like choosing your battles wisely.
Yeah.
Top-heavy structure, you're a gladiator going for the kill.
Right.
Flatter structure, you're more like a chess player, outmaneuvering your opponents.
Bingo! And then you've got those crazy winner-take-all tournaments.
Oh, yeah.
Those are a whole different beast.
How so?
Since only first place gets paid, standard chip EV strategies apply.
Right.
You're not worried about ICM or risk premiums.
Okay.
It's all about maximizing your chip count and being the last player standing.
So it's a pure test of poker skill.
You nailed it before you even sit down at that final table.
Yeah.
Make sure you understand the payout structure.
Okay.
It'll dictate your entire strategy.
Okay, payout structures matter. Got it.
Yeah.
What about those pesky little antes?
Oh, yeah.
They seem kind of insignificant compared to the big blinds and stacks we're talking about.
Don't underestimate those little bastards. Ante-size can actually have a big impact on how loose or tight the table plays.
How so?
Larger antes mean there's more dead money in the pot pre-flop.
Right.
This incentivizes players to loosen up their starting hand requirements because there's more to be gained.
So it's like a feeding frenzy, but with cards instead of sharks.
Damn straight. And on the flip side, smaller antes necessitate a tighter approach.
Okay.
You got to be more selective with your starting hands and avoid risky plays because the potential reward isn't as high.
Okay, so ante-size dictates how loose or tight the table plays.
Yes,
Got it. So we're basically playing a whole new game here at the final table.
pretty much.
Does that mean our trusty pre-flop charts are useless?
Pretty much those GTO ranges you spent hours studying, they don't account for ICM or the unique dynamics of a final table.
So we got to chuck those charts out the window and start thinking differently.
Well, you got hand values change drastically at a final table.
Okay.
Big pairs like aces and kings become even more valuable because they block your opponent's strongest hands.
Makes sense. But what about those small pairs and suited connectors? Are those still playable?
They lose a lot of their value because they're risky to play aggressively.
Right.
If you get shoved on, you're often forced to fold because of those big pay jumps.
So it's like playing chicken with a ticking time bomb.
Right.
You got to be super careful about when you commit those chips.
Right. One of the sources even mentioned that pocket nines,
Oh, wow.
which is a pretty damn good hand in most situations,
Yeah.
can often be a fold at a final table if you're facing a big bet, especially if a short stack is still in the hand.
Damn, folding nines pre-flop. It just feels dirty.
I know.
So hand values change big time. What about our raise sizes? Any adjustments there?
Definitely one of the biggest mistakes players make at a final table is defaulting to the minimum raise. You got to mix it up.
Oh.
Larger raises are better when you're playing tight because they make your opponents think you're holding the nuts. But if you're playing a bit looser, smaller raises can be a powerful tool for putting pressure on your opponents without risking as many chips.
So it's all about keeping your opponents guessing.
Yeah.
Speaking of opponents, how much should we be focusing on reading them at the final table?
Reading your opponents is crucial at any stage of poker,
Right.
but it's even more important at the final table.
We got to understand their motivations, their fears, and their tendencies.
So it's like a psychological battleground out there.
Exactly. Some players are completely oblivious to ICM and will overplay their hands.
Yeah.
Some are laser focused on the win and will be super aggressive, and some are obsessed with those pay jumps and will fold almost anything to secure a higher spot.
So we got to figure out what makes our opponents tick and exploit their weaknesses.
Exactly, and you can't underestimate the power of observation. Pay attention to their betting patterns, their body language.
Yeah.
Any tells they might be giving away. Even a simple comment can give you valuable insight into their mindset.
Right. The sources mentioned a story about a guy who was desperate to take fourth place money because he needed it to pay off his house. That's some serious pressure.
Right, and knowing that information could be gold.
Yeah.
If you know someone's trying to secure a certain payout,
Right.
you can exploit that by putting them in tough spots where they're forced to choose between survival and maximizing their winnings. So it's not just about reading the cards, it's about reading the damn players.
You got to final table poker is a game of skill, strategy, and psychology. You got to master all three to come out on top.
All right, so before we dive into post-flop strategy,
Yeah.
Any other pre-flop nuggets of wisdom you want to drop on us?
Just remember, it's all about making calculated decisions that maximize your expected value.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to fold those big hands if the situation calls for it.
Right.
And don't be afraid to take some calculated risks when you have the opportunity.
So play smart, be aggressive when we can, and always keep our eyes on the prize.
Exactly. Final table poker is a mental game as much as it is a card game.
Well, our minds are officially blown. We need a minute to digest all this pre-flop insanity before we move on to post-flop.
Okay.
Okay, my brain's still smoking from all that pre-flop talk.
Yeah.
But we're only halfway through the battle, right? What happens when those flop cards hit the felt?
Shit gets real post-flop play at a final table is a whole different animal. You got to shift gears again, adjust your thinking, because the strategies we talked about pre-flop
Right.
can change dramatically once you see those community cards.
All right, so walk me through this post-flop jungle. What are the biggest things we need to be aware of?
Well, just like pre-flop stack sizes still matter. Big stacks still have that luxury of being aggressive, using their chips to control the pot and put pressure on everyone else.
Makes sense. They can afford to lose a few pots without it being a total disaster.
Exactly. They can use their chips like a weapon, forcing weaker hands to fold,
Right.
even if those players have decent holdings.
So if you're sitting on a mountain of chips,
Yeah.
you can basically dictate how the hand plays out.
Pretty much. And one interesting thing the sources mention is that big stacks can often use smaller bets post-flop.
Really? That
Exactly.
seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't they be betting big to try and blow everyone out of the water?
Not necessarily. Remember, everyone's playing tighter at a final table, scared shitless of busting out and missing those juicy payouts.
Right.
So a big stack can often get away with smaller bets.
Yeah. Because their opponents will be hesitant to call with anything less than a strong hand. So it's like a mind game. You're using your stack size to intimidate your opponents into folding, even if they have decent cards.
Exactly. It's about maximizing value without taking unnecessary risks. You don't want to scare them off completely.
Right.
You just want to make them pay a premium to stay in the hand.
Okay, so big stacks use smaller bets to control the pot.
Right.
What about the short stacks? How should they approach post-flop play?
They got to be a lot more creative. They can't just bully their way through pots like the big stacks can. They're walking a tightrope, one wrong step, and they're out at the tournament.
So it's a high-risk, high-reward kind of game for them.
Exactly. The sources talked about how short stacks often use small continuation bets post-flop.
Hold on, isn't that a bit weak? Why not bet big and try to take down the pot right there?
Because remember, their goal is to avoid getting all in unless they have a monster hand. A small continuation bet might be enough to win the pot if everyone else missed the flop. But even if they get called, they haven't committed too many chips and can still reevaluate on the turn or river.
So it's like dipping their toes in the water without jumping in head first.
Exactly. They're trying to steal pot if they can, but if they face resistance, they can back down without blowing their entire stack.
Okay, so big stacks use smaller bets to control the action, and short stacks use small bets to avoid overcommitting.
Right.
What about those poor souls stuck in the middle with a medium stack? What's their play?
They're in the toughest spot. They have enough chips to be somewhat aggressive, but not enough to bully the table like a big stack.
Right?
They gotta be really good at reading situations and picking their battles wisely.
So they need to be the most adaptable players at the table.
Absolutely. They need to know when to push their advantage and when to back down. It's all about maximizing those small opportunities to chip up without taking unnecessary risks.
It sounds like they need to be masters of reading their opponents and the board texture to make the right decisions.
You gotta post-flop play at a final table is a lot like a game of chess. You got to be thinking several moves ahead, anticipating your opponent's actions, and always be ready to adjust your strategy on the fly.
Damn. This is intense. So there's no easy answer, no magic formula for post-flop play. It all comes down to experience, intuition, and a deep understanding of the game.
Pretty much, final table poker tests every aspect of your poker skills. It separates the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
All right, so we've covered the basic dynamics of post-flop play for different stack sizes. Let's get a little more specific. What are some of the most common mistakes players make post-flop at a final table?
One of the biggest blunders is overplaying top pair.
Wait, isn't top pair usually a strong hand?
It is in most situations,
Yeah.
but at a final table, those inflated risk premiums come into play again.
Right.
You can't just blindly shove all your chips in with top pair and expect to win, especially if you're up against a big stack that might have you outkicked, or a short stack who's basically playing with house money and is willing to gamble.
So top pair can actually be a trap hand.
Absolutely. It might seem like a strong hand, but if you overplay it, you could be walking right into a buzzsaw. You got to be really careful and consider all the factors before you commit your chips.
Okay, so what should you do if you flop top pair at a final table fold and run?
Uh-huh. Not necessarily. Depends on the situation.
Okay.
You got to consider the board texture, your opponent's tendencies, your position, and of course your stack size.
So there's no easy answer. It's all about reading the situation and making the best judgment call based on the available information.
Exactly. Sometimes you might bet big to try and protect your hand. Sometimes you might check and try to trap your opponent, and sometimes you might just fold and live to fight another day.
Okay, overplaying top pair is a big no-no. What other post-flop pitfalls should we be aware of?
Another common mistake is chasing draws too aggressively, especially against a shorter stack.
Right, because those short stacks are looking for any excuse to shove all their chips in the middle.
Exactly. If you're chasing a flush or a straight, you got to be really careful about how much you're willing to invest. If you miss your draw and they shove, you're probably going to have to fold and watch your tournament life slip away.
So it's like playing Russian roulette with your stack.
Pretty much, you're better off waiting for a stronger spot to commit those chips. Don't let a desperate short stack bully you out of a pot just because you have a glimmer of hope with a draw.
Okay, chasing draws too aggressively. Check any other post-flop landmines we should watch out for.
Believe it or not, a lot of players make the mistake of not being aggressive enough when they actually have a strong hand.
You're saying people get too passive at final tables?
It happens all the time. They get scared of those payout jumps and start playing too cautiously, even when they have the nuts.
But wouldn't that be just as costly as being too aggressive if you have a monster hand and you don't bet it, you're missing out on value?
Exactly. If you have a hand that's likely to win at showdown, you gotta bet it strong. Put pressure on your opponents. Make them pay to see those cards. Don't let them get a free look at a potential winner.
So don't be afraid to put the pedal to the metal when you have the goods.
Damn straight final table poker is all about finding that delicate balance between aggression and caution.
Yeah.
You gotta know when to pounce and when to lay in the weeds.
All right, we've talked about some of the common post-flop blunders. Now, let's flip the script. What are some tips for playing post-flop effectively at a final table? Give us the secret sauce.
Okay, here are a few key things to keep in mind.
Okay.
First, pay close attention to your opponent's tendencies.
Right.
Are they aggressive or passive? Are they prone to bluffing or are they calling stations?
Right. That information can tell us a lot about how they're likely to play their hand.
Exactly. If you know your opponent is a loose cannon who likes to gamble, you can bet bigger with more marginal hands. But if you know they're tight as a drum, you might need to value bet thinner or bluff less often.
So it's all about tailoring your strategy to each individual opponent's playing style. It's like a game of cat and mouse where you're constantly trying to outsmart them.
You gotta figure out their weaknesses and exploit them. Another crucial tip is to always be aware of your position at the table. Just like in any poker game, position is power.
Right, because being in position gives you more information. You get to see what your opponents do before you have to make a decision.
Exactly. If you're last to act, you have the advantage of knowing whether your opponents are betting, checking, or raising.
Yeah.
You can then adjust your play accordingly.
So position gives you more options and more control over the hand.
Absolutely. It's a huge advantage that you should always try to exploit. Don't underestimate the power of position.
Okay. Position matters. Got it. What else should we keep in mind when navigating the post-flop streets?
Be aware of the board texture. The cards on the board can drastically change the strength of your hand.
Right. A board with 3 hearts is a lot different than a board with 3 spades if you have the ace of spades.
Exactly. A coordinated board with lots of potential draws will generally favor the aggressor, the player who's betting and raising, but a dry board with no obvious draws will usually favor the player with the made hand, the one who already has a strong holding.
So we got to adjust our betting based on the board texture.
You got it. If the board is scary and there are lots of potential draws out there, you might need to bet bigger to protect your hand and discourage your opponents from chasing those draws. But if the board is harmless, you can often get away with smaller bets, knowing that your opponents are less likely to have a strong hand.
Okay, so we got to read the board, read our opponents, and be aware of our position. Anything else we should keep in mind to avoid completely screwing up post-flop?
Just remember, post-flop play at a final table is all about making calculated decisions based on the information you have. It's a complex game with lots of moving parts, but if you can master the fundamentals, you'll be well on your way to crushing those final tables.
So stay focused, pay attention, and trust your gut. Got it.
You got a final table poker is a true test of your poker skills. but it can also be incredibly rewarding if you can navigate the minefield and come out on top.
Well, I'm exhausted just thinking about all this.
I hear you. It's a lot to take in, but trust me, once you start applying these concepts, you'll see a major improvement in your final table results.
All right, let's take a quick breather and then dive into the final stretch of this final table deep dive. All right, we've covered a shit ton of ground here. Pre-flop strategy, post-flop madness.
I know.
It's like our brains are about to explode.
Final table poker is like a mental marathon. But we're in the home stretch now.
Okay, before we cross that finish line, though,
Yeah,
let's recap like the most important takeaways.
sure.
What's the one thing Gustavo needs to remember when he's staring down those final table lights?
I think the biggest thing is this final table poker is a completely different game
Okay.
than any other stage of a tournament.
Right.
You got to throw out a lot of those standard strategies
Yeah.
and adapt to the unique pressures and dynamics.
All right, it's not just about accumulating chips anymore.
Right.
It's about making calculated decisions that maximize your expected value. Thinking about those dollar signs
For sure.
instead of just the plastic chips.
Exactly. Those payout jumps can be a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
They can make you a ton of money just by surviving,
Right.
but they can also cripple you with fear, making you play too cautiously.
Yeah, finding that balance between aggression and caution
Yes.
is crucial. So how can Gustavo or any other aspiring poker pro
Right.
master this final table beast? It sounds pretty damn intimidating.
It takes practice study and a willingness to constantly learn and improve.
Okay.
The more you expose yourself to those high-pressure situations, the better you'll become at handling them.
So what are some resources that people can use to hone their final table skills? We got to give Gustavo some homework here.
Yeah, there's tons of great books and articles out there.
Okay.
One book that really stands out is The Final Table by Gareth James. He does a great job of explaining complex concepts
Yeah.
in a way that even a donkey like me can understand.
Right.
Plus, he includes a ton of real-life hand examples,
Okay.
so you can see how these strategies play out in actual games.
The final table. Got it. What about videos? Are there any good ones out there
Oh yeah, tons.
that can help visualize this stuff?
Doug Polk has some fantastic content on upswing poker,
Okay.
and Jonathan Little's YouTube channel
Right.
is a goldmine of valuable insights.
Gotcha.
Watching those guys dissect hands and explain their thought processes
Right.
can really accelerate your learning curve.
Right. It's like having a seat at the table with some of the best minds in poker,
Yeah,
picking their brains without them even knowing it.
exactly. And don't forget the value of practicing.
Okay.
Find some friends who are also serious about poker
Right.
and simulate final table situations.
Okay.
Or hop online and play some final table-specific tournaments.
Right.
The more you play, the more comfortable you'll become with those pressure-packed moments.
It's all about getting those reps in,
Yes.
getting used to the heat of battle.
Right. Final table poker is a skill. And like any skill, it takes practice to develop.
All right, Gustavo, we've given you the playbook, the tools, the resources.
Yeah.
Now it's up to you to put it all together.
Right.
Any final words of wisdom before we send you off to conquer the final table world?
Just remember to keep learning, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to experiment.
Okay.
Final table poker is a complex game, but it's also a game of intuition and feel.
Yeah.
Trust your gut, make the plays that feel right to you, and most importantly, have fun out there.
Right. Don't take it too seriously.
Right.
It's a game after all.
Exactly.
Enjoy the ride, the competition, the thrill of the unknown.
Exactly. And remember, even the best players in the world make mistakes.
Of course.
Don't beat yourself up if things don't go your way every time.
Right.
Learn from your mistakes, adjust your strategy, and keep grinding.
Solid advice. Final table poker is a game of variance. You're not going to win every time. But if you consistently make good decisions and play to your strengths, you'll increase your chances of walking away with a big score.
Damn straight.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for our final table deep dive. We hope this episode has given you the tools and insights you need to crush your next final table.
Big shout out to Gustavo for requesting this topic. We hope this helps you on your poker journey.
Now go out there and make us proud. And if you have any other poker topics you'd like us to tackle, hit us up in the comments. Until next time, good luck at the tables.
Romper Room, where we ball or break. Big wins, big losses, all at stake. Party vibe, poker life, always crunk. Feel rich, feel broke, that's just the funk, yeah. Seen boys rise, seen boys fall. Bluffing stacks, risking it all. Got the queens, thought I locked the pot. Straight flush flip, now I'm feeling shot. It's the hustle, it's the grind, no time to assume. All in a full life in the romper room.